The Kubernetes API plays an important role when a request is submitted to the cluster. Imagine you have a cluster and you submit a request to deploy 2 replicas of a pod. This request is received by the API server in the cluster control plane. The API is made up of multiple components. The first component verifies whether the user has access to the cluster. If not, the request is rejected. Otherwise, it's passed to the next stage. The next step checks whether the user has required permissions to do what they're about to do. Then the mutation admissions controller modifies requests, adds default, and applies extra properties defined by policy engines such as Kyverno. Schema validation then checks if the request conforms to the defined resources. The validation admissions controller checks requests against standard Kubernetes rules and applies custom policies, rejecting any that don't comply. For example, you can define a rule that states that only private container images are allowed. And if someone submits a pod YAML that has a public image, the request will be rejected. After all these, the resource handler writes the final object to etcd. This will include the information about the deployment and how many pods are to be created. Then we have a few other components in the cluster whose job it is to spin up the required pods. Next time you submit a YAML file, remember that it doesn't just walk into etcd, it gets interrogated, mutated, validated, and only then admitted to the cluster.